She may have hit share screen, Kirsten, because that's
Okay,
the
let's
only way
see.
this would have happened.
Okay, this will stop others sharing screens. Okay, I'll hit that for right now.
Yep.
Wait, hold on. It doesn't appear. Sorry, you guys. We've got. Hey, Nancy. We are seeing your screen. I'm trying to um, stop participant sharing. Let's see. Did that help?
Yes.
Okay. Hi guys. Sorry. We're all new at this, aren't we? We just all need like a 13-year-old sitting next to us managing our accounts right now because it's so overwhelming. So anyway, we are all on mute except for Penny. And as you may have remembered if you were here last week, Penny is she's our TA today. I'm the professor and Penny's our TA. And she is going to be monitoring the chat box where you can ask questions. Now we're gonna just kind of, or just a little high level, this is a question I have about this. Penny's gonna watch that as we go through this, and she's going to call my attention to the fact there's a question when it's appropriate, and then what we'll do is we'll ask you to unmute your mic and then ask your question. So Penny will say, hey, Susan, we've got a question, or she'll let me know and we'll make sure that you get your question answered. Then what we'll do, and that's just in the beginning when we're talking about each of the different regions, talking about each of the different wines, but then we will open it up for free flow questions for you guys, and you can unmute yourselves. And then please remember to remute your mics because it just gets absolutely out of control with a lot of people on the phone or on the computer, depending on what you've logged in with. So, Penny, did I forget anything at this point? So,
Nope. I would just say the chat, if you just sort of activate your mouse or your touchpad, you'll see the chat at the bottom taskbar. And you just click on that and you can choose to share your message with everyone, or you can click on the drop down and just share it with me or whomever. But yes, if you have a question, just share it in the chat and then we'll call on you.
All right, so I'm hoping most of you have the wines for the week. This was quite a quick scramble, all of these last couple weeks of different types of programs and yay, I see one there, woohoo, Ringbolt. And so happy that you guys were able to get some of these wines. And if not, every week, you guys, as we go through this, just keep in mind that if you haven't gotten a chance to get to the liquor store and get the wines, we're going to be putting up the recording on the same web page that you guys used to download the PDF and to find the link for the Zoom. That is our private club page. And so you'll be able to get the recording. We can put it up as early as Monday each week of that class that you might have missed that previous Sunday. So that you know, if you get out to the liquor store on Tuesday and you want, and you're ready to do the wines on Tuesday night, you're welcome to do that, or one at a time. It's totally up to you guys. This is all, this is COVID style wine school. We're not gonna give anybody detention for anything at this point. So welcome. So I didn't do a real introduction to myself last week. I'm hoping to get some of my our other professors, Fox School of Wine professors, involved in teaching as we get this program rolling. So I am Kirsten Fox, and I started Fox School of Wine in 2008. And I have, we've got about, 12, 13 people in our company now, helping us out on events and tours and that. I'm an executive sommelier, which means that rather than going through the Court of Master Sommelier program, which many of you may be familiar with, where those are the movies. That's like Somm and Bottle Shock and those kinds of things. That Court of Master Sommeliers is really dedicated toward restaurant service and such. I went through a different educational program called the International Wine Guild. It's actually based and located, headquartered out of Denver, which is nice because we're so close to it. And they have programs that go 6 months, a year, 3 years, but they also have programs that are just an 8-day intensive study type of program. It is like drinking water from a fire hose when you go to these intensive classes. But what they stress in their education and their certification programs is at a level of management and business. So I would be compared at an executive sommelier, certified executive sommelier, to an executive chef. That would kind of be what you'd be in a restaurant world if that was, so I'd be managing the somms, say, of 12 different restaurants. So that's where my background comes from. There's a lot more business training in the International Wine Guild, as well as they've got the service, they've got the education, but there's also not the blind component that you see, that these master somms are, swirling and smelling and trying to identify, year, vintage, location, all of that. The International Wine Guild doesn't really approach it that way, which is good because I've told some of you this, I don't have a very good taste bud palate. We all, as a background on that, I'm just, you guys start drinking if you want to start drinking, please, always. But yeah, I don't know what you got, Penny, there, but yay, a little Chard. But when the human body comes with, we all are born with between 2,000 and 10,000 taste buds, 2,000 to 10,000. So you can imagine that the people that have 10,000 taste buds are much more precise in their tasting experience. People with 2,000 are less precise. You might get berry from someone who's got a $2,000 taste bud tongue. You might get berry, but the 10,000 taste bud person may get a raspberry versus a blackberry versus a boysenberry. So when you are trying to assess your own palate and you see some of these descriptors, and you're like, I don't get it. You can get to a high, you can train your own taste buds, but you obviously can't add taste buds to your tongue. So you can only work with what you've got, refine what you've got. There's a fun trick that I've said in some of my classes where you, let me admit a couple more people here. If you take one of those little pink packets of Sweet and Low and you dissolve it in about 6 ounces of water, and then you start drinking. If you taste bitterness while you're drinking, you are probably at the higher level of taste buds. If you, sorry, I'm trying to let poor Barbara Yamada in. I think she's getting in now. And so if you take that and you're drinking it, you're getting, and you taste bitterness, you are at the higher end, 8,000 to 10,000 taste buds. In the middle there, if you take that Sweet and Low with in the water and place it down, and then you taste bitterness, you're actually you're in that middle range. You're like a normal taster. Most people are in the normal range. And then if you never taste that bitterness, if it's always just a sweet taste and there's no bitterness for you, you are a low taster, which means you probably are in the $2,000 to $4,000 range, taste bud range. So I I don't taste bitterness when I taste sweet and low. I've had no problem with tab. I mean, when I used to drink it, my friends would be like, God, it's so bitter. And I'm like, I don't even taste it. So that's a little bit of an aside, but just wanted to let you guys know that it is something that is of note, whether you're just going to get berry or you're going to get, you know, boysenberry versus blackberry. It's very nuanced that way. So test yourselves and see about it. All right. We are talking about Australia. You've got a map on your PDF that if you downloaded it, check that out. And Penny, if you wouldn't mind bringing that up, and you'll probably have to speak so that they can see it. Oh, there it is. I hope you guys can all see that. Thank you. And so we are looking at this is a region in Western Australia, and it's called Margaret River. Now, there are some other cooler regions that are in Australia that are in the mountains, for example, outside of Adelaide, which is in South Australia. And you'll notice there's like this little, yeah, thank you, Penny, right there. If you went north from Adelaide into the mountains, that's another cooler region because it has these cooling breezes that come up and it's also higher altitude. So that's another area. The challenge is the labeling on the wines, because sometimes the winemakers will choose to use South Australia. Sometimes they'll use Adelaide Hills and that. So it's a little bit of a challenge. The good thing is Margaret River in the Western Australian area is a fully cooler region than most of the rest of Australia. So, and they use it on their labels. So you will see that, for example, well, you probably have this on your handout, Penny, if you want to show them the Vasse Felix bottle, which is a little lower on that page. It is, you'll see under Vasse Felix, and if you guys have your bottles, you already will see this. The Vasse Felix is there, and then the Margaret River is right under Vasse Felix. So, and same with the Cabernet that we're going to be doing, tasting. It's got Margaret River right on the label. So you will know that that is where it's grown, and that is a cooler region. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about let's see, I think I've got, let's see, let me make sure everybody's, we've got everybody in, we've got a phone person that's, I can't mute. Let me see, if your phone number ends in 1334.
They are muted.
Now muted. Thank you very much, whoever did that. It wasn't me. So anyway, when we're talking about Australia, when you look at the larger picture of Australia, there are 3 regions that produce the most wine in the region. And it's about 2/3 of the grape harvest. And these are down in, thank you, Penny, these are down in the New South Wales, South Australia, and Victoria areas, right down there. And they are, you guys, these are regions that are hot, and they have these rivers that they actually will channel they'll use irrigation and channel to the wine regions where they're trying to grow these grapes. And the challenge with these areas is, number one, they're so hot. And so these grapes get super, super ripe very quickly, and often will drop in their acidity very quickly as well. But also, part of the problem with this irrigation water, and it's a big problem, is number one, the irrigation water into this area is, it's got a lot of pollution in it. Also, they have droughts in this area a lot, so the water will just dry up. And then also, they have a really high salt content in the river there. And so if you're bringing salt in, it's obviously not going to be good for the vines. So that's where the majority of the the grape juice is grown in Australia. The finer wines are really on the edge of Australia, and at the southern and southern edge, and really a small swath of the area. And the Western Australia area is no different than that. It's on the edge of the continent. And let's see. Okay, so when you talk about the grapes that are grown in Western Australia, when you are, Penny, would you mind pulling up that map one more time of Western Australia, please? Thank you. So when you guys see the little point of the Margaret River, where the point of the arrow is, you'll notice that is literally the juxtaposition right there of the Atlantic currents and the, what's the area to the outside of that? Oh goodness, hold on.
The Indian Ocean or something?
Thank you, Indian Ocean, thank you. So right there is the tip. And so the Margaret River area is being influenced as much by the Indian Ocean as it is by the Antarctic, and how it comes together right there. And those cooling waters from the Antarctic actually will pull the air above them into that area. So there's this cooling breeze that comes off of the ocean right there into the Margaret River area. So it really provides some coolness that some of the other regions don't get. All right, so when we look at when we look at the Margaret River specifically, Vasse, let's start with our Chardonnay from Vasse Felix, because Vasse Felix is the first winery ever to go into the Margaret River area. So let's take a look at this, and you might already be surprised by the color. So again, we'll start with our 5 S's. First S is sight. So you want to look at this, and I tip them down away from myself and try to find a piece of white paper to look at. And you're looking through the wine at the white paper. Can you read things on the page? And then I also look at what the colors are. If this was an alien's face, and you're looking down on an alien's face with the little pointy chin and the fat cheeks and the forehead up here, if you look at where the cheeks are on the side of the glass, you get right in this area. Let me do this, you aren't gonna be able to see that, but if you look in the side of the glass as you tip it down away from you, you will see a good amount of color in those cheeks there. And so I'm seeing kind of a warm yellow there. It's got a little titch of an orange, let me make sure that's not my lighting here. I'm seeing a good straw yellow, not really light, but a nice straw yellow. This might be a surprise already to you guys if you drink a lot of Chardonnay, because this looks lighter than many Chardonnays that we get from California and other regions of Australia as well. So we're looking, we've got it, okay, information gone in, a little darker than some of the wines the wine we tasted last week, certainly darker than that. Then the second S is swirl. So you want to swirl your wine in the glass. If you don't like doing it in the air, put it down on your desk or your table and swirl it. That's lifting the aroma molecules into the bowl of the glass. Then we're going to smell, sniff, scent. And when you sniff, I really do want you guys to get your nose close to the wine. Now we're going to do an experiment, because I've gone to the mat with other people about this little trick I'm about to tell you, and I'm not sure. I will be so curious. If you guys want to raise your hand, if you look down, so I'll tell you what we're doing, and then at the bottom there at your screen, if you move your cursor, there's a little reaction button, and it's got a little smiley face on it. And if you click that, there's a thumbs up or there's a hands clapping. So if when we do this together, you smell the difference, give us a thumbs up, okay? So what I want you to do is, I'll first explain, aroma molecules have different densities. So the heavier densities are things like forest floor and leathers and such like that. Then middle level is more associated with the type of the grape. Is it going to be, are you going to get creaminess? Are you going to get fruits and flowers and that kind of thing? They're at this kind of a level. So supposedly, if you swirl your glass and you turn it so that the wine's you're almost snorting it, and you go from the bottom of your glass to the top of your glass, you should be getting more of the grape's personality, the more of the grape Chardonnay in this case, so green apple, pineapple, those kinds of smells here, and more of the winemaking technique up here at the top of your glass. So some somms will say, now remember, I'm a low taster, so don't take my word for this. So some somms will say, this is the Chardonnay, and this is the winemaker at the top. So I'm so curious if you guys want to let me know who maybe sees that, because does anybody, I don't see any hands yet. Oh, I see a thumbs up. Yeah, I see. Sean, you guys, yeah, okay. That's great. Look at that, you guys. Laura, awesome. So I don't think that,
Darcy.
yay, you guys, that's so great. So in the future, as you are smelling your wines, take your nose from the bottom of the glass, that's the grape, and slide it to the top. And that should be the winemaker's hand, the oak, the things that you can smell that aren't necessarily grapey. I am so impressed with you guys. All right, so okay, that's our third S. Let's take a sip if you haven't already through all my monologue.
So while everyone's sipping, I'm going to share a fun fact about Margaret River and how it got its name. Allegedly, John Bussell, there's a little town in Margaret River, well, it was a main town back then called Busselton. So he's John Bussell, he found Busselton. That was his cousin, Margaret. So he named the area after her because that river was so central to the area. So he named it Margaret River.
I love it. Thank you, Penny. Yeah, we're, in fact, the doctor, you guys got this on, thank you, Penny. You guys got this on your information sheet. For some reason, doctors were the ones who founded a lot of the regions. I guess they were just, maybe they had plenty of time because they didn't have a lot of people to work on. Certainly it wasn't during COVID, but a lot of doctors were the ones that founded wine regions in Australia. And that's not any different than this. In fact, oh dear, I didn't print mine out, but you guys got the handout, and it's Tom Cullity, and he was a cardiologist who started the area. And he was the one that founded the winery we are drinking this from, Vasse Felix. The fourth S was the fun one. That was our sip. And then the fifth S is the savor. And so that's the finish. What does it do in your mouth? We tend to want wines, we will pay more for wines that are longer finishing wines. Part of that has to do with the fact that if they're in our mouths and we can taste them longer, then as we eat our food, they are a great complement for the food that we're eating because we can taste them for a longer time. So those are our 5 S's. So if you go through that every time, that would be great. And I'm so impressed that you guys could smell the difference in that. It's amazing. Okay, Margaret River. There are 100 growers in this area now, in the Margaret River area, and there's 60 grape growers that aren't actual producers. So I'm sure you guys have gotten that before. There are some people that just want to grow the grapes and don't want to worry about the bottling and all that part of the wine business. And then there are others who want to do the full gamut. And then there are others who just want to bottle. So the grape growers, 60 individual grape growing companies, and there are 100 producers, and the producers would be the ones who would be buying some of those grapes, but they're the ones that actually produce the wine. Summers in this area are dry and they're warm. The winters are wet and relatively mild. They're not getting super cold there. The challenge is the wetness, because grapes you can't have grapes in a super wet soil structure, because the roots will rot. They're not made for that. So you need really good drainage. So that was one of the things that Dr. Cullity figured out, is where to plant grapes at the beginning in the Margaret River area that had the best drainage, because then the roots, the water rolls through and it's not sitting there on those roots, rotting them and that. So that is why this area works, because if it does get a lot of rain, and if it didn't have that kind of soil, it would be stuck there. So Penny, do we have a question?
Yes, well, we have a comment from Joel, I believe. His says iPad, but I think it's Joel, right? Yes.
Oh yeah, hi Joel.
So he mentioned, and I agree with him, he doesn't get it. He said it is aged 8 months in oak, but he's not picking up any of that oak. And I'm not either. Is it not new oak? Is that why? Is it?
Wow. Okay, so Joel, give yourself a hand. That is so amazing. And Penny, you too, excuse me. And anybody else who hasn't raised their hand, but this is applying to. So this is such an interesting, they have a huge plan for all of their wines. This wine was aged in oak for 8 months, like you pointed out, Joel. It was in French oak barriques. Now, barriques are smaller. They're not as big as barrels. Did I flip that?
No, that's true.
No, that's barriques are small. But they only have 6% of that vintage in those barriques. Only 6% of the grapes were put in those new French oak barrels. Then, after they were in there for 8 months, they used 1 to 5 year old American and French oak for the batch. So it's not heavily oaked. And so really good palate, you guys. And why do we care about French and American oak? By Joel's question, French oak, it's just like everything. Comparing France to the US, say, French is all subtle. Everything's subtle. The music is classical. The food is refined. The wine is very soft and food friendly. And it's all very subtle. And same, funny enough, with the oak that are produced, the oak trees in France, they're even refined. And they have tighter grains, and I'm not picking up the word on the, anyway, they have tighter grain. I'm going to call it the grain. And so it basically doesn't allow as much exchange of oaky flavor into the wine that's sitting in the barrel. And then we look at American oak, and it's just like everything else in America. It's like bold. It's like barbecue and blues and jazz, and it's in your face, and it's stand up and look at me. And so American oak is much more, it imparts much more flavors into a wine. So in this case, they only did 8 months of maturation, only 6% of the wine in French oak. So it's just barely touched by the French oak. And then even later with the aging and that process, these barrels that they used, whether they were French or American, they were 1 to 5 years old. And as the barrels age and as they're used, they impart less and less flavor into the wine. So great question. Okay, so we've got this really nice wine. And one of the things that I love about this wine, I've always loved this wine. I used to rep this wine when I worked for Southern, but it's so light on the oak that it goes very well with foods. And at the price point of this $22, $23, it tastes like a more refined wine that, say, a European Chardonnay or some of the nicer wines out of California that are, they don't have as much heavy oak used on them. So they are so much more food friendly. So that's one of the reasons I love this. Does anybody have any questions? Let's open up the floor to the Chardonnay and have any questions about that.
Joel commented, and I was just replying, like, are we finally moving away from overly oaked whites, do you think?
It sure seems that as Americans, the bar is swinging back. It kind of, we didn't even, you know, Chardonnay is still the most popular white. It's not the most grown white. Arian in France is the most grown white grape. But Chardonnay is the most popular consumed grape. And at the beginning of the American love affair with wine that started in the 70s, and so the wines were very heavily oaked. The Chardonnays were very heavily oaked. I would say, Joel, that's a really good, yes. As far as I'm seeing, there are more producers that are moving to a lighter style of oak on the Chardonnay. Also, the other wine that's oaked a lot, white wine that's oaked a lot, is Viognier, which is another heavier bodied wine. And they're still using oak on Viognier. They never really used as much as they did on Chardonnay. So I think that's a valid point. Yeah, I think that's a valid point.
One more question that I love is, why did the Aussies move to screw tops so much more than other places? They've adopted them with
great question.
reckless abandon.
That's a great question. First thing, it's nice to take on picnics, isn't it? But the Aussie tradition, the Aussie wine region only started really, so get this cool fact. 1996, Australia decides to target annual sales of its wine. Now, this is 60% of their wine is exported. They targeted in 1996 that they wanted to meet $4.5 billion, okay, by 2025. $4.5 billion, that they wanted their industry to be that, and they decided this in 96. Guess what? They hit it in 2003. The Australian wine market just took this huge, huge lift. And keep in mind, none of these regions is anything, well, there are some old wineries but they're very isolated. Most of these wineries are 20, 30, 40 years old at the most. So they are on the edge of the new world of production. So they don't have all of the traditions that we are all so familiar with, having consumed a lot of European wines and having the history in Europe of the wines. So basically, New Zealand actually came up, hold on, I don't think I'm about to say something that's true. Hold on. Yeah. New Zealand came up with what is called the Stelvin. This is a Stelvin designed screw cap. And New Zealand came up with it, but Australia was extremely quick to jump on the bandwagon. Couple things here, you guys. When you think that back in the 70s and 80s, when these Australian regions were starting to kind of do this and they were going to head into the world population, there were about 10% of wines that were out on the market that were bad. They were tainted with TCA taint, which comes from the cork. They were oxidized. They were bad. And if you can imagine a winemaker and a winery going into a business where 10% of their wine may not be good in their bottles, they would lose fans, obviously, because people would think, well, that's an awful wine. if they didn't know what they were tasting, why it was bad. And you can imagine that's a lot of their production. Screw caps, no exchange of air, none. So in terms of what's in this bottle, the cork isn't going to make it bad, and the oxidation of something getting in isn't going to happen. So that's two of the main reasons that wine will go bad. So they adopted this, and many of their wines are, I would say, this is off the top of my head, but I'm saying maybe 75–80% of their wines are using Stelvin caps. The challenge with Stelvin caps is, as we all would know, because it's metal and wine's an acidic product, you can't get them together. And so the wines that still, like Penfolds, some of the higher end wines that are supposed to be aged from Australia, you'll still see them using cork, because that laying on its side, that will allow a little bit of oxygen in, and it will properly age the wine, versus the risk of, if you're going to have a wine sitting on its side for 15 years, the chance that it's going to be bad with the metal that close, and that it's just not a good idea. The wines with Stelvin caps they would be 5 years at the most. I would never keep anything longer than 5 years with a Stelvin cap. Okay, how are we doing on questions?
Good, you just answered one. Brooke asked about the metal cap, how long, and then Darcy mentioned that she thinks it is brighter than a lot of Chardonnays, but would it still be better with a cow or sheep milk cheese rather than a goat, as a complementary pairing rather than a matchy-matchy, like, or contrasting pairing maybe?
Good question, Darcy, our cheesemonger on the call. Darcy is the cheesemonger at the market at Park City. So you might recognize her, short hair and short blonde hair, and always answering great cheese questions. So we were talking last week, we had a wine that was really good with goat cheese. And so the question is, with this wine, is this better with goat cheese or a cow's milk cheese? And I think you're right, Darcy. Many of the Chardonnays that have gone through malolactic fermentation, and let me just get there in a second, but they will be better with a creamy cow's milk cheese. Now this has gone through malolactic fermentation, so we've got that creaminess on the palate, but it still is really high in acid. So I would say this is like a crossover to me. I would say this could probably work both with a cow and goat and sheep. Excuse me. What do you think, Darcy? If you want to throw in into the chat box or unmute yourself, what do you think about this with cow, sheep? You know, where are you on this one?
Yeah, unmute yourself, Darcy, and let us know.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm getting good at this. So I have it with a Latour, which is a 3 milk cheese, but the primary flavor is really the goat cheese. And so the acids are actually fighting a little bit, but it has some of the sheep and the cow that mellow it out. I wouldn't say it's my favorite pairing, and I think I wouldn't go further to just the goat, but I just happened to get, here you go. I have Beaufort, which is sort of like a Comté or a Gruyere, if people are more familiar with that. So I'm going to try it with just a nice full fat. This is actually an Alpage 2-year aged full fat cow's milk cheese. And an Alpage cheese means it's made with the summer milk. So it's very rich. So I'm going to see if that's better. But my first experience was so with the influence of the goat. So I felt like I hadn't read the tasting notes. And so I was thinking that the Chardonnay would be a little more towards the earthy, buttery side. And so kind of have too much acid. So here's the Beaufort, I'll let you know.
This is very good.
Thank you, Darcy. Thank you. So it's such a privilege to have you on the call with us. It's really nice. Yeah, that's great. So malolactic fermentation, you guys, for those of you who don't know, and then we'll move on to the cab, Malolactic fermentation, if you think of malic acid, is in the acid that you get out of a Granny Smith apple. So malic acid, really biting acid, that's in grapes as well. Lactic acid, milk, right? Cream. And so malolactic fermentation is they introduce a bacteria into the tank, and the bacteria eats malic acid and it poops out lactic acid. So no kidding. And so we end up with a creamier, and they said that this vintage was so cool and so high in acid that they did, for the second year in a row, use malolactic fermentation on this wine, and it's still this high in acid. So it's kind of interesting how the winemaker can use these tools, lighter oak, heavier oak, light, malolactic fermentation, not malolactic fermentation, depending on what the raw product is that comes out of the vineyards. Okay, so we're going to wrap up the Chardonnay and move on to the Cab. Now, let's do those 5 S's. So we've got our first S is sight. So I'm looking down at a white piece of paper. I'm seeing a little bit, what's the age? Oh yeah, this is 2015. So most of you, I'm guessing, are 2015. Depending on where you buy these, they sometimes can vary. And I never put vintages on my notes because of the Utah system, and some of the stores have older or younger vintages. But this is a 2015 that I have. And I can see, you may notice that, so as red wine ages, it gets more burnt orange color or orangier. And you can notice around the edge of this, where I'm seeing the white kind of really highlight, it's a little bit orangier because it is a 2015. We've got 5 years on this. If this was younger, we would probably see more purple than this kind of orangey garnet red. Okay, so that's our sight. We do our swirl, and then we do our scent. Now, let's do that slide up again. Because in this one, I can smell the wood at the top. How about you guys? Are you guys, show thumbs up if you're smelling that wood this time. I surely couldn't do it the first time, but wow. You can get that wood. Very interesting. So that would reflect on the amount of wood that was used on that Chardonnay, which was very minimal. But wood is used on this one. So that's our third S. Fourth S is the fun one. Let's take a sip. And then the fifth S is savor, the finish.
So there's just a couple comments. A lot of people have the 2017 and they're saying how purple it is. So it's a little younger, as you're saying, because you have the 2015. And yeah, they're all agreeing that it's much more purple, and they're probably not seeing that burnished garnet orange around the edge.
Shoot, and I don't think that can show you anything. Yeah, I wonder why mine was, all right, well, there you go. So we've got the demo. I wish I could show you the color, but it looks more like a garnet than a purple, you guys are getting. Any other questions right now, Penny, about that? You good? Okay.
I'm muted. Hold on. Sorry. Margot had a great question about regional cuisine for both of these, because they're from Margaret River. And you know how a lot of times regional, if you eat regionally, it will match the wine. And she wondered if there was any cuisine in the area that pairs well with the wine.
I will tell you. Thank you, Margot. Great question. Let me read you. I love this. It's the World Atlas, and I love referring to this. But this is a caption on one of the pictures of what is in the area. Now, they said, this is the caption: the inhabitants of Perth used to say that their nearest good out-of-town restaurants were in Singapore. So they have a lot of influence by the across the ocean, but they have a lot of seafood in this area, as you would expect, because it's right on the ocean. Has anybody traveled there? Does anybody have any? But I don't have a lot of information about the food there. Has anybody traveled there that wants to give us any input?
I have, but I don't remember distinctly a cuisine in the area. I ate a lot of halloumi, cheese, and no, most of the places we went were just like fusion type places, you know, like we were going to an Italian fusion or Asian fusion or something where they were sort of doing their own spin on another cuisine. I'm not a huge like burger fan, but there was a lot of gourmet burgers there as well. But I can't think of anything like specifically that, aside from they were very serious about their farm to table.
Oh, cool. Thank you, Penny. So I guess we don't have a really good answer for you, Margot, other than Singapore's the second place to go for wines. I mean, for food. This is anybody, okay, so when we're talking about cool region, is anybody surprised at how light this wine is? Are you guys surprised? Yeah. It's a lighter cab. We are so used, now it is 14% alcohol. So, which is for a cab, not super, super big, but it's not 13, but it's not 15, like some of the warmer regions produce. And what I love about the, okay, so Ringbolt is just, I just love that it's named after one of the shipwrecks off the coast there. I can't wait to go there at some point. I'm so captivated by shipwrecks and that. And this is a pretty hardy coast. This is not a light, you know, beautiful beach of, you know, soft waves. They've got surfing there. There's a lot of crashing of waves. And so these boats get stuck and crash. Oh yeah, great, Penny. You got some pictures there. Ringbolt was one of the wrecks that came off the that happened off the coast, and that happened in. Hold on, that happened in
late 1800s.
Yeah, late 1800s. Yep. So, and that's just one of hundreds. I mean, if you look up wrecks off Western Australia, it's like this map, just tons and tons of wrecks off there. So they chose to name their wine after the Ringbolt because it says it pays homage to the countless years of hardship endured by the settlers there in Western Australia, their strength, their tenacity, and their commitment to making a go of the potential opportunity afforded to them. And so that's why they chose Ringbolt. Now, when you are looking at a cab like this, often this is the challenge with cool region cabs. And I'm curious if you guys are getting this on the aromas or possibly on your palate. Sometimes if a Cabernet grape does not get ripe enough, it throws off a vegetal, green pepper, sometimes called jalapeno. It can throw, and this happens in other grapes as well. I mean, Sauvignon Blanc as well can give us some jalapeno-like aromas. I'm okay on this wine, but is anybody feeling, I mean, some of you super tasters out there, is anybody feeling like you're getting a lot of green pepper and that on this, or are you comfortable with this? You're getting, I'm seeing thumbs up. So we're getting some vegetal off of this, and that often comes from a cool region Cabernet. And so keep in mind that when you're doing, say, kebabs on a grill, and you have steak, and you have onions, and you have green peppers, and mushrooms, this is going to be a wine that's going to be really great, and it's not going to overpower it because it's a little lighter in style, but it is going to go with those more vegetal types of foods, and things that might be encrusted with herb, like lamb with herbs, or a leg of lamb with herbs around it. That's one of the reasons that wines that do have that titch of herbal can go with so many foods, because they really come together at the same time on your palate, and they have that same, like Penny was saying, or like Margot was asking, what's in the region usually goes with the wine that's grown in the region, and in this case, the vegetables kind of go together with some of those vegetal aromas that you're getting out of this wine. Okay, let me think, is there anything else I wanted to add? If you do go, here, let me share my screen. I think I still have it up. Let me see. No, I don't. Yeah, I'm going to show you guys. So let me go to Ringbolt, because the winemaker, I'm still getting my whole thing down here on how to do this, but she looks like she may be 12. I'm not sure. Let me show you a picture of her. Yeah, here we go. Let's see if we get there. Can you guys see her?
Yes.
Okay, look at her. She looks seriously like she is maybe 12 years old. And so cute. And she's come out of the other regions in the area. She came out of, hold on, she started in the Barossa region, and she worked for one of the most famous families in the whole country, the Hill Smith family. And so she's done a lot in her, they didn't give her age, but wow, she is a young woman. Cabernet, oh, we didn't talk about the food for this, but I put up some recipes that looked like fun, that might be fun for us. But did anybody do the pairing earlier, either for the Chard or the Cab, and want to share anything about the food that they enjoyed with this, and did it work or not work? Just unmute yourself and let us know if you've got any feedback.
Hey, Kirsten, it's Brooke. So we did both, and it was actually before I read your tasting notes, but they both worked really well. We actually got the chicken dinner from Hearth and Hill the other night, and it had like a whole chicken that they roasted and then probably like dropped in the fryer to crisp up the skin. And then it had these like broccoli flour with an Indian spice on them. So when you said the chicken curry salad, like it kind of did have that. It was so good with that chicken. So, and by the way, I would totally recommend that dinner. It was only $35. And Huff and I have been eating it for like 3 days. So, yeah, so it was a good deal. And we did the Cab with like a sausage and peppers the other night. And then we also tried it with like a grilled ribeye, thinking it would be more like a Cab, but I think like the lamb probably is a better idea.
Thank you, Brooke. I appreciate that. Anybody else?
I had done one. This is Nancy here. I had done the Chard with a chicken with it was in coconut milk, adobe, peppers, and onions sautéed and braised, and it was fabulous with it. It really was. Did that last night, and haven't tried the red with anything at this point, but yeah.
Great, thanks, Nancy. Anybody else want to throw out their food choices at this point? We're going to start to wrap up the call. Does anybody have comments, questions that that you have about the wines, the region? See if I can answer them.
Sarah paired it with sushi, the white. They had it with the sushi, the other night. So I don't know if they want to unmute and just make a little comment about that.
We thought it paired very well with sushi. It held up well.
So tell me, Shara, what kind of sushi was it?
Well, it was a roll, but it had tuna and it had salmon.
Was there spice on it, or was it relative? I mean, were you using the umami of like the soy sauce, or what was the?
It had a spicy aioli sauce on top of it with a little bit of caviar, and so it was. I thought it. You can chime in.
Yeah, it held up well.
Well, that's great. I would say that this is a Chardonnay that I wouldn't put many Chardonnays with sushi because of the strong, especially more heavily oaked Chardonnays. This is lightly oaked, and so I wanted to hear what your thoughts were on that. With the aioli, that creamy sauce, that sounds like it was a good fit. That sounds great. Yum. Anything else we want to talk about? Well, does anybody have any questions about going forward? Let me show you the wines for next week. We're doing Chile next week. So we've got Route 1. It's a Carmenere. Now, I have never tasted either of these, so I'm really excited. We're doing unusual grapes, you guys. I didn't want to just go with the normal, Cabernet. They do a lot of Cabernets. They do Sauvignon Blancs down there. I wanted to do something fun and really taste these unusual. I've had Carmeneres, but I've never had this one before. So it's Route 1 Carmenere. That's one of them. And then we've got Meli and is Carignan. Carignan is a Spanish grape, although it's used more in France. It's they use it a lot in France, but this is going to be something that's going to be more red fruit and spicy, but then it's got some umami kind of. I've never had this. I'm so excited to try it. So these are our two wines for the Chilean class next week. And again, we will have the recording of these calls up the following day on our website, and you guys have the club passwords to get in. So you just go on in there, and if you miss the class, you can look at the recording while you're drinking to learn about it. And it's so fun to see all you guys, and so happy that we all are coming together and still doing our tastings. Any last questions before we sign off?
Kirsten, are those wines available at both the Kimball Junction as well as the Old Town and the Park City wine stores? Do you know?
Sean, you guys, I'm going to share my screen because this is going to be the most useful trick you will ever learn. We're going to set aside everything about your previous information. So I'm going to a new tab. I'm going to the DABC website, and I'm going to go back to their homepage. This is what are you guys seeing this?
Yes.
Okay. This is the DABC website. I use this about 4 times a day. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to show you right here. Over here to the right side, locate a product. So you click on that, and it brings this little bar up, these little 2 bars. Now you have in your notes off the page on your shopping list, you'll have the DABC code to put in this section if you want. But let's just put down, I'm going to type in Meli, and let's see what it pulls up. So it's got something that this isn't what it is, this isn't, but here we go. Meli Carignan right there. You select it, a list of what
Oh, you froze, Kirsten.
Okay, so this is a $14 bottle. You can see here's the number right up here, and then you can see that Snow Creek has 8 of these. So it doesn't look like let's see, I think it's store 37 is the one out at Kimball Junction. So Snow Creek has 8. Now let's look at the alternative. Let's see, what did I choose as an alternative? One second. Let me, let's see, Penny, do you have well, anyway, I think it was a Carignan. Let's see what happens when I type in Carignan. I think, was it this one? I don't have my notes from what I've suggested, but I'm just gonna hit this one. And it will show us what is available in the state. So here we go. We've got Snow Creek has 8 of these. Yeah, I think this might be it, Domaine de Nisas. But this is actually I think it's a French wine, but that was the only other Carignan that I could find because this is an unusual type of grape. So I'd say your answer to your question, Sean, is go to Snow Creek on this. Great. All right, guys. Thank you.
Have a good week.
Have a great evening,
Have a
and
good
we'll
week.
see you next week.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining.
Bye.
Bye.